Hello, everybody, and welcome to Real Hawk Talk. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and it is great to have one of the best members of our crew back in action, back on the saddle. And no, I'm not talking about Jeff Simmons. I'm talking about Nathan Ernst at Nathan E11. It's been, I think, since the draft, Nathan.
Yeah.
Since we've had a chance to chat. Is that right?
I think that's, probably like a week after the draft or something like that. But yeah, it's been a minute.
That is the right way to do it, where there's really almost nothing happening during that time period. Twitter has been it's been weird. I was talking about this last week with Jeff a little bit. I feel like maybe it's just the off season and nobody's around. Everyone's out having fun in summer. Maybe Twitter's never going to be the same. Like it feels like noticeably, like I feel like tumbleweeds are kind of like going down the
I think that's part of it for sure. But also, it's been a little hard for me to like really latch on to anything with the Seahawks because it's just so unknown right now. Like, okay, the draft's done, free agency's done, and now it's just wait and see what a Mike McDonald football team looks like. And so, like, I don't know. There's not a lot for me to be like to feel really opinionated or passionate about right now. It's like I just kind of gotta see what this team looks like. So I'm super excited for like preseason and everything, but it's kind of a funky time in terms of discourse, at least.
I love what we get in chat already. Matthew Phillips, he says, I need someone to talk me down from 13 wins. This is the energy that I like. I mean, I definitely feel that my journey from January to July has been one of dejection to inspired. I'm really looking forward to this season. I really like what's set up for the Seahawks. I like that there's so many people that are predicting doom. Like BetMGM came out again today. I think this is in our Slack chat for people that are not patrons. Patreon.com/hawkblogger. It is a great place to stay in touch with all the stuff going on. I think it's better than Twitter, especially now. They still have Seahawks at 7.5 wins. They basically think that they were on the wrong side of variance with the last minute wins, the one score wins that they had. New York Times losing record prediction. And I get it. Like there's not a single coach on this team that has all like coached together other than Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff. Leslie Frazier and Mike McDonald, I guess, but like as a collective, it's a grand experiment. But I'm personally pretty eager to see it and see that there's some really good things happen. And guys, today rookies reported, so no news is good news there. I think. Did either of you, Jeff? I will welcome Real Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter to the show. Jeff, have you heard anything that I should know that will depress me about the rookies reporting?
I have not. We could talk about Ricky Pearsall being on the non-injured list, but that might excite you. But no, it's been what Nathan was saying is true. There's like this weird quietness about them, and like usually there's all this like radio content to kind of take in at this time of year, but like there's not much going on. Everyone's sort of in that wait and see. Brian, you're honestly one of the only people providing quality content right now. And no, there was like, other than like a picture of Byron Murphy today, like I didn't see anything. And I'm not seeing as much as I did basically what we talked about last week on Twitter. But yeah, it's oddly quiet right now.
Which makes I say that like, hey, I'm not like, I don't find a lot to bite into or engage with the Seahawks. And meanwhile, you're doing a daily podcast and talking about them. So pretty impressive that you've managed to, that you seem that excited about him.
That is nice of you to say. I've been kind of surprised I've been that excited about it. And I mean, look, I I've already previewed week 1 and week 2. I listened to Broncos podcasts. I listened to Patriots podcasts. And today I listened to Dolphins podcast. So I'm all set for tomorrow morning to do a bit of a week 3 preview. But, Seahawks facing the AFC East this year, it's kind of a fascinating year to play the AFC East. With Aaron Rodgers, coming back to the Jets and some of the moves they made, the Bills going through their kind of progression. And then Miami is always a fascinating team. I'll give a little sneak preview, but like people around the Dolphins can't decide if they're better or worse than they were last year, and listening to them talk about Jerome Baker versus Jordan Brooks and listening to them talk about their offensive line, their interior offensive line, and losing Robert Hunt and some of those. I mean, it's definitely a division that's kind of in flux this year. I mean, Jordan Poyer going from the Bills to the Dolphins, like there's a lot of these kind of trades that happened that we're going to see in the first year. We're going to see Cody Barton back in Seattle. We're going to see Jordan Brooks back in Seattle. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of endlessly fascinated, but we're just days away from actual real news. And that brings me to the first real news. I want to get your guys' take. So as of yesterday, Brandon Aiyuk formally requested a trade from the 49ers. I went on, did a quick emergency pod on this. I actually got some texts from my 49er friends. I do have 49er friends and former colleagues, a lot of Bay Area folks, because they saw my Instagram rant about the 49ers and why their fans should shut the hell up. But word is, there's a group out there that says, hey, Deebo Samuel did this a few years ago. The 49ers eventually signed him to a deal. This is just a ploy. There's other folks that are like, this is not the same situation it was back then, either cap wise or otherwise. And this is potentially a situation where Aiyuk could end up holding out. Jeff, I'll give you first dibs on this. What was your reaction? News, not news, from your perspective that Aiyuk requested a trade?
I think it's news. I think slowly but surely. I know you want to compare it to the Deebo thing, but they're in a really interesting window right now with Purdy not paid yet, Trent Williams nearing the end of his career. If you look at their cap, they really have, this is probably the last year they can really have this whole group together. Maybe one more year, but they're in that window. And Aiyuk has been to the point where he was tweeting all that stuff about Jaden Daniels and all that kind of stuff there. And then I think the fact that he formally asked out, I think that's pretty meaningful. And I think it's a sign that, and then I saw there was someone was retweeting that Juwan Jennings was taking digs at him, that he's putting himself ahead of the team, and Tariq Woolen was chirping Juwan Jennings. There's all this stuff going on. So yeah, I think it's news. I think the fact that he formally asked for a trade is certainly news. I don't know if San Francisco is going to budge off that. I don't know if ultimately it'll move the needle there, but I think the fact that he's unhappy to the point that he wants out, and it still just comes back to the overlying point with me that they messed this up. And the other times we've talked about, it wasn't as meaningful because the receiver market had not exploded like it has in this year. And also they have to pay Purdy next year. So every financial decision they make is going to be really crucial. Purdy's going to get almost $60 million a year. So the fact that either they have to trade Aiyuk at a lower value, I loved what you said the other day about all the guys they could have gotten had they traded them in this draft. And when you went through even Quinyon Mitchell at 22 or 23, wherever he went, the next year I saw someone saying next year's first round is not going to be great. I know the depth of the draft, but you're not going to be having Jared Verse at 19 or Troy Fautanu at 20 and things like that. This whole field this just emphasized to me that this whole thing's been a missed opportunity by them.
I mean, I'm curious, Nathan, I think none of us were that high on Dallas Turner, generally speaking, and he slid a little bit, but I don't think any of us think he's a bad prospect. He went at 17. So the Vikings traded up to get the Jags pick at 17. The assumption would be that if the Jags wanted Aiyuk, they would have traded that pick to the 49ers plus more if the 49ers were sitting here right now with Dallas Turner, and let's say they still picked Ricky Pearsall in the first round with their other first round pick, do you think that they'd be better off than what they would be if they traded Brandon Aiyuk? I'm eliminating the option of Brandon Aiyuk staying with the team. So let's just if they trade him now, do you think that they could still be in that good of a situation, or they could have picked Amarius Mims, or they could have picked, Jared Verse or Troy Fautanu, or, all these other guys that got picked after 17. Do you think the 49ers would have been in a better position had they made that trade versus what they would get in a trade now?
No, I mean, I think we talked about it a ton. Like, the depth of this draft class that we just had was insane. So it's hard to think that if they get like a top 10 pick next year, that feels unlikely. But I mean, that kind of feels like where you have to get to be in the range of maybe not quite that high, but Dallas Turner versus some of these other guys are usually guys that go around 10. So it's hard to think that they would have that they're going to come out ahead compared to what they could have gotten out of this last draft.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as the teams that are reported to be in it, it's expanded a little bit, as it probably will. Half the league is going to be rumored to be involved, but the Commanders and the Steelers, have come out of Aiyuk's mouth. There's every reason to believe that they'd be interested. Commanders, maybe even with Aiyuk, maybe they would, if their pick, if it was a first round pick, would be a top 10. I don't think that's out of the question. I don't think the Steelers would. I mean, Mike Tomlin had never had a losing record. They had 10 wins last year with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. But then the Patriots, I mean, if they got a first round pick out of the Patriots, that's a top 5 pick.
I mean, barring something crazy from Drake May, yeah.
Yeah, I listened to the Patriots podcast, and it's dire there. They're pretty worried about their offensive line and about, Drake May is pretty inconsistent so far. But I guess even if they get top 5 pick, which could be huge, right? They're also fighting time. They won't have that pick. That player will not be on the roster this year. And Brandon Aiyuk would, in that scenario, also not be on the roster. This feels like the last full-fledged year of this generation of 49ers players. Next year could be no Trent Williams. Next year could be no Deebo Samuel. It could be a number of things. So that's where it feels like a real miscalculation on the part of the 49ers. Maybe they'll all resolve and they'll sign him, and I'll stare at the cap again. I'll be like, how do they keep doing this where they just hand out more money to Christian McCaffrey, and they hand out more money to this guy and that guy, and it all is fine. But right now it feels like a big mistake.
Are we sure that this is what the return will be for Aiyuk though? Are we sure? Because the Jaguars just traded down, right? They didn't trade out of the first round altogether.
Right.
So, I mean, now maybe they could have packaged Aiyuk in there first to get up to 17 or something like that. But that's a big difference than just getting the picks outright. What I refresh my memory here of recent receiver trades, or mid to high first round pick really realistic?
Yeah, and you got to pay him $30 million. That's
unless John Schneider's on the other end of that phone. Nobody's probably doing that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, AJ Brown went for a first and a third, 18th and 101.
Oh, he did get a first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which turned into Traylon.
Tyreek Hill went for 5 picks. I don't think he's a Tyreek Hill level player, but Tyreek Hill went for a 2022 first, which is the 29th pick, a second round pick, 50. So a first and a second, and then a fourth that year, plus a fourth and a sixth in the following draft. So, who else has been traded recently?
Devontae Adams went for a late one, but again, because the receiver market has kind of gone nuts this year, you're paying for the right to pay him $30 million. That's got to bring down his value, like Nathan said. I don't know if people are out there being like, we need to give up our first to pay this guy $30 million.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Davante Adams because one of the rumors that's come up today, and I give Grant Cohn some credit because he's been pushing these. Sometimes Grant's just clickbait, and I respect him for it. It's fun to follow. But his general thought is the 49ers don't want picks. They want a guy that can help them win now. And so he was one of the first guys I saw propose like Terry McLaurin would be one of the people that they want back from the Commanders. Jeff, you and I talked about that. I don't know if the Commanders would want to do that. Like the whole reason would be to get Aiyuk and McLaurin for Daniels, right? As opposed to trading one for one.
Makes no sense.
But the other name is Davante Adams has started to come up as an option from the Raiders. And they're not alone though, because the rumors are that if Adams would be traded, where else would want him? The New York Jets, Aaron Rodgers, and that there'd be some interesting competition there as well. So what do you guys make of the Davante Adams potential rumor there?
To the Niners or just in general?
In general, but specifically to the Niners, yeah.
I would not want to see it. I think he's still one of the premier receivers in the league, and I think his value might be a little bit lower. I don't know if you've seen any of that receiver Netflix show yet. Have you?
I will not watch it. It's too many 49ers in that.
So the only entertaining part of it so far, Davante like openly hates Jimmy Garoppolo. Like he begs the coaching staff to bench him. Like he's on the sidelines, like losing it. And that part's funny because we all think of Jimmy, but he like openly like this has no time for him. It's pretty funny. But I think because of how bad the quarterback play has been there, like Davante's kind of gone into like this point where people forget how good this guy is. I don't want to see him on that Shanahan offense with all those guys. I would not be happy with that. That would scare the crap out of me.
What is he making these days, though? Like, he's not a cheap player, and he's not a young player either.
He's got to be high 20s.
I mean, I'm sure it's not going to be a straight up trade, but that does. I mean, like that just kind of feels like them getting older and more. I mean, maybe short term more expensive, long term maybe less expensive. I don't know how it shakes out, but like, yeah, I don't know. That he's a very good player, but Aiyuk's a very good player. So. I don't know that it would move the needle a ton for me until we play him and he like torches us. Like I do remember the last time or that one Packers game they played him and he was just unstoppable. So
yeah, I mean he's an excellent receiver, but Davante Adams is also used to being highly targeted. I'm gonna pull open his numbers, but my recollection is he's like 140 target kind of guy. And Aiyuk was the top target on the 49ers last year. He got 105. And so I don't know that. Yeah, geez, 175 targets last year, 180 the year before, 170 the year before that, 150, 170. That's not how the 49ers offense works. I think he is like a primary receiver that you just target over and over again. I don't know that Shanahan's offense is about manipulating and whoever is the open guy gets the ball, generally speaking. So I don't know that he's best utilized for the 49ers, but I'll admit, like if they get Adams for Aiyuk, I think that they would be relatively equal to their challenge now, but or their quality now. But I do think, I mean, Adams is aging, and I think he's declining somewhat. He is 32, and one of the things that people don't appreciate about Aiyuk is how good of a run blocker he is.
Yeah,
and how he affects when the 49ers deploy Aiyuk, Juwan Jennings, George Kittle, and Trent Williams on a side of the field. That is as good of a blocking conglomerate as you're going to find. And that absolutely has helped Christian McCaffrey on some of these long runs. Davante Adams is one of the worst blockers at wide receiver in the NFL. So I do think there's multiple kind of layers to it, but do you think ultimately Aiyuk holds out? And part of the reason I'm going deep here, one, it's like legitimate news. It's legitimate news in the division for the division champ. But like, let's say that he decides to hold out. His maximum amount of games that he can miss, I think you have to accrue 6 games on the roster for your contract to toll, for you to accrue a season. That would mean he'd have to be there by the 11th game of the season. They play the Seahawks for the second time in the 10th game of the season. So conceivably, Aiyuk could miss both of those games, but it feels like more likely the 49ers would trade him before the deadline if it was still going on. Or how do you think that would play out? Do you think they just wait him out and then make him play and part ways with him after and just hope that he was good enough to help him get a Super Bowl?
I think it's pretty unlikely he holds out in the first place. Like, he has not made a ton of money in his career. And so I don't know that that's something that he's going to be able to stomach when you can just show up and like give 80%, or, you know, you don't have to try super hard if you do show up, which, I mean, maybe that bodes well for the Seahawks. We'll see what he actually does, but I just have a hard time thinking he's actually going to do that.
What do you think, Jeff?
I'm the same way. The league has really taken away a lot of those in-season holdouts because of like the fines they've put on and all the talk and all the back and forth. There just hasn't been a lot of those high-profile holdouts since they put in those new rules. And I think what Nathan said is spot on. I think he's a guy who hasn't made a ton of money in his career. He was a later first-round pick. This is his time to really cash in. I don't know if he would give up all that money. And the fines are very heavy at this point. I think he would do what a lot of players do. They make a lot of noise, and then when the season starts, they reluctantly show up. But yeah, will you see the same 100% effort and blocking? Will you see the same focus? And he's a guy who's been in Shanahan's doghouse before. But they need him. But no, I don't see a lengthy holdout where he like shows up for the last 6 games. That just really hasn't happened.
You guys have more confidence in that than I do. I feel like the trajectory of this thing has been Brandon Aiyuk pretty clearly stating, one, that he wanted to go to a team where he could be a featured receiver. You heard it from his girlfriend. You heard it from his friends. Like, that was they kind of were done with San Francisco after the season. Then it looked like maybe they'd come to an agreement, but San Francisco didn't want to pay him. He was willing to do a number that now he's not willing to do because all these other contracts have been signed. And then he went and talked to the 49ers, spent an hour and a half at the 49ers headquarters last week, and they answer back with something that's not willingness to actually do the deal at what he wants. And now he's requested a trade. If they don't come back with his number, and that's to me the key thing, I don't think they're going to come back with his number, then him showing up and playing is a risk because he's going to get his money. Like, he is going to get his money. And I feel like his only other leverage play would be to hold out. So I don't have quite the same confidence. You guys could totally be right. But I'm just cheering for as much chaos for that team, as much internal strife as possible, because their fans deserve all of it and more. So that's the Aiyuk stuff. Let's talk about Seahawks training camp. What's like the top story that you're looking forward to finding out more about, Nathan? Where do you have your highest level of curiosity about this team?
The linebackers, I think. What they're doing there. I mean, I have a lot of questions about like how they're going to use those guys and how effective they'll be doing the stuff that McDonald wants them to do. We won't really see that probably until the season really starts. But just kind of seeing what the pecking order is, how much, shine is like Knight getting, that how all that is going to shake out. I think it's the biggest question. Every other position, may have strengths and weaknesses, or we can say whatever you want about it, but I don't know that there's any spot on the team that has just as many like anything could come out of the linebacker spot and it wouldn't shock me. Like, if Radigan's starting in the year, like,
oh god,
I mean, like, yeah, like I'm not excited about that probably, but like, yeah, sure, maybe he won a starting job. Fine, I don't know. So that's really the most. I mean, besides, and then also just like fun rookies. But yeah,
Jeff, how about you? Oops, we lost your audio somehow. You're unmuted, but I don't know if your mic got unplugged. You can try to keep working on it. Just start talking after some point. And we'll see if we hear you. Yeah,
classic. Pull it out, blow on it, see if it works better now.
the classic tech solution.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Look, blowing on it works. This is why people do
The
it.
Sega Genesis cartridge trick. I can't believe that worked.
Yeah. So yes, what's kind of the top thing that you're looking for to start learning about in training camp?
I want to learn more about Ryan Grubb. Again, I've heard all other things from you guys. I've really relied on you guys. I didn't watch a ton of Washington. I got to know their offense around the draft, but I know you guys were super high on him. I know Nick Saban had identified him. The whole coaching staff, I'm just really interested to see. And I don't know if we'll see it until the season, but just what McDonald did so well in Baltimore and what Grubb did really well in Washington was just player utilization, which has not been a strength of Pete Carroll's staff really since Dan Quinn left. And once like they had to move Red Bryan over and they had all those unique chess pieces. But as they start training for more like chess piece type players, and even last year with JSN, this has not been a strength of the Seahawks for quite some time. And for me, like my real focus is on Grubb and what he can do to make this offense, and whether that's using DK differently, whether that's the screen game, whether that's obviously I'm very invested in seeing JSN be used correctly as a middle of the field weapon and not 1 yard off the ball. And I know like some of the media last year said they were shocked at some of the formations they saw him in camp, and then the season starts and they're using him like a completely different player. So I'm excited to learn about Ryan Grubb and what he's going to do for the offense, how he's going to utilize the talent they have, because I think that's where they have a lot of elite skill talent. Well, not elite, but they have a lot of high quality skill talent. And then on defense, yeah, same. We'll probably won't see much till the opener, but just player utilization is what McDonald did so well in Baltimore. And I'm just eager to see who's going to show up differently, who's going to emerge that I wasn't expecting. And I think there's a lot of fun things there.
That's an interesting thing to bring up, and it makes me think, or at least wonder, when's the last time that you guys remember the Seahawks having a scheme advantage where either scheme or coaching, where you felt like our coaches were outmaneuvering opposing coaches pre-game, in-game, during the season? What comes up to you when I ask that question? What's the last memory that kind of jumps to mind?
The read option years and some of those halftime adjustments. So
2012.
I was gonna say the Tom Cable years, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
I
Jeff,
mean,
how about you?
It's probably not fair, like, to Pete, because they had such an incredibly talented defense that they put together that they didn't have to have a schematic advantage. But yeah,
it was pretty sparingly, honestly, the last several years. One of the things I've talked about is how they've been lapped in the scheme game. There was times where Waldron did some really creative things like tight end groups. I think more in 2022, and we saw it a little bit before. They kind of struggled last year. I think Nathan was the first to bring it up, that they wanted to be this 11 personnel team, but they didn't. That was not their best set. And so they really lost themselves a lot of the time with scheme. So other than like a couple times where they just used their tight ends creatively over the last 2 years, especially defensively, it goes back to like Red Bryant and Brandon Browner. I can't think of many other times. And it's been one of my biggest criticisms of this coaching staff has been their details and what McVay and Shanahan have done with scheme and how they fell behind.
Yeah. Some people would say the cover 3 that, Pete brought in, and I don't know if I buy that, because I don't think it was the scheme. It was the fact that they had players that were so good that they could play the simplistic scheme so well that even though you knew what you were going up against, you still could not achieve your goal more times than not. And so it was much more about like the talent. There's talent advantage. That's an easy question to answer. But true, like consistent schematic advantage where teams are having to figure out. I think you're right, Nathan. I think read option's a good one. A little bit for me comes up in the second half of 2015 when Russ really started cooking in third downs, and like Doug and Tyler started working a lot of like
rub
third
routes and pick
rub
plays
routes, like right, like they were
those quick
really
passes.
hard to handle for that half of the season. But generally, like it just hasn't been. And so the fact of the matter is, there is the potential. There is the potential for the Seahawks to have that on both sides of the ball. Ryan Grubb could either bring in new concepts that people haven't seen and be the college guy that comes in and innovates. He could fall flat on his face and be the next, college guy that not hack it. Right.
Yeah.
Mike McDonald, I think we have a pretty good confidence will be some sort of advantage, but I think the defensive scheme advantages are not that durable, probably. I don't know. Do you guys agree with that? Like, it feels like everyone's trying to run these sim pressures now. People will start getting more used to them, I would think, and maybe that will diminish that advantage. I see you nodding, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, McDonald has definitely had a scheme advantage with the Ravens, or at least last year. But like with Pete, when Pete came, and the one thing that we should probably give Pete credit for is like, yes, they went out and they got super talented players and they played a pretty straightforward defense, but they like strategically completely zigged from the league. And part of the reason that they were able to get such talented players that fit the cover three so well is that was not a popular thing at the time.
Yes.
And so like there was a schematic advantage from that perspective, but not in the like drawn up crazy plays on the whiteboard kind of perspective that you typically think about it.
Yeah.
And Pete, that was like brand new, right? Like Pete like totally brought that back into the league. McDonald, like you're saying, it's been here for a minute now. And so even if the advantage doesn't disappear this year, it is something that everyone's already adjusting to, right? Like they played the Chiefs maybe as tough as anyone last year. People are going to pay attention to that and start to think like, okay, we have to find answers to this. And so McDonald is going to have to start to adapt and like find new ways to get advantages sooner than later, most likely.
All right. There were some names that were running with the ones during minicamp. I'm going to give you those names. I want you guys to tell me which, if any of these names, are going to remain the starter at the end of training camp. Okay? You ready? First name is McClendon Curtis at right guard. Second name.
Wait, sorry. Are we predicting that they will start the first game of the
season? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Second name, John Radigan, inside linebacker. Third name, Patrick O'Connell, inside linebacker. Let's see. I think this is true, but I want to double check. So I'll give you a couple. Fourth name, Trey Brown, opposite of Reek Woolen at corner. Fifth name, Draymond Jones at outside linebacker. And I will leave it there. I think those are all the potentially surprising names, depending on your perspective. Let's put... This is kind of the inverse. Byron Murphy being a backup, not a starter. He's running with the second string. Will that still be true come the regular season? Who wants to go first? Jeff.
So do I have to pick one or just as many as?
Pick which ones you think will remain in that position as either starter or, depending on where, the one with exception being Byron Murphy, as a backup.
I'm going to go with Trey Brown.
He will start.
I think they're going to play. They're going to be a nickel as their primary defense, and I think he will be the outside starter.
He was starting over Woolen.
He was starting over Mike Jackson or Artie Burns or DJ James or Nehemiah Pritchett.
Yeah.
So how are we considering Spoon in all this? Because like
he is so it's a three corner starting group. Assume that. Assume the nickel as a starter.
Yeah, I don't think Trey Brown's quite a bold prediction. I think it's pretty obvious. The next one, who is the next one? Oh,
yeah, John. I'm going to read the names again.
No, there was one after Trey Brown.
There was Draymond Jones.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no on Draymond Jones. I'm gonna say it's Mafe and Nwosu.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say Murphy starts as a backup. I think their base defense is probably going to be Williams, Reed, and probably Hankins. And I think Murphy's going to be used as like an explosive pass rusher in certain sets. I think they're going to try to ease him in. And I think they have the veterans where they don't need to overload him. I hope I'm wrong on that one. I hope he just plays so well that they have to keep this guy on the field. But I think the amount of veterans they have and what they can do in that base group with Reed, Hankins, and Williams, I think that's where it ends up will probably be for week 1.
Nathan, any differences?
Those are the least spicy for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to I kind of want to bite on the McClendon Curtis one for some reason. But yeah, no, I think those are the two easy ones. If I had to take a dark horse here, I think I'd go McClendon Curtis for some reason.
All right. Now, same list of guys, same list. Which of those would signal the biggest concern if they remained where they are in the pecking order?
Patrick O'Connell, I think.
Okay, we got to vote for Patrick O'Connell.
Starting like an FCS player.
That's probably the right answer. I'm going to go McClendon Curtis. If Christian Haynes doesn't start, or like if Bradford comes out and runs, like Bradford was a project, he was a guy we had crazy tools. If he puts it all together, if I can buy that over Haynes, but if it's McClendon Curtis over those two guys, especially Haynes, who was like a 5th or 6th year senior who was supposed to be pro ready, and they got this like classic Seahawks guy, like you don't know who we have in the building, John Schneider guy. I'm in full panic mode if he's opening day starter.
Yeah, I think at least with McClendon Curtis, I can squint and think, well, maybe this guy's better than we know. Like maybe like he's got the physical attributes to be a decent player. And if he is beating out Anthony Bradford, who has a lot more starting snaps, I mean, this guy has no starting snaps, and Christian Haynes, who we know that they would love to, then maybe he played really well. Like I can at least imagine my way to that. But John Radigan or Patrick O'Connell, either one of those guys, honestly, either one of them, if they're starting week 1, we're in a little bit of trouble. Like that's not good. Also, because not only does it mean Jerome Baker or Tyrell Dodson are hurt, because I don't think they're getting beaten out, it also means Tyrese Knight has not done enough to demonstrate that he should be one of those two. And so you are playing 2 low ceiling, or either one of them would be a low ceiling starter with severe limitations in their game.
I will say, I think Radigan and O'Connell are more the Roquan role, whereas Knight, I imagine, is going to be in the Queen role, at least to start. Right. So wouldn't necessarily spell doom there, but yeah, wouldn't be great.
I would struggle with that one.
They might lose to Denver if they're playing one of those guys.
Okay. I don't want to hear that. I want to ask you about some guys that may be on the bubble. Okay. And I want to get a read from you guys. Which of these guys, if any, you think will actually make the squad? All right. Cameron Young, nose tackle. I will tell you, I think Mike Morris is on the bubble more now than I realized, because I looked at what the Ravens kept at defensive line the last few years, and it was like four players one year. It was 5 players the next. If they keep 4 players, it's Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jaron Reed, and Jonathan Hankins. And so all of a sudden Mike Morris is on the bubble. If they keep 5, who knows? But Cameron Young, that's a real one. I think Mike Morris I'll put on the list. Daryl Taylor, I'll put that name on the list. Artie Burns. Remember they drafted 2 young corners. Kobe Bryant. I could add some more, but I'll stop there. Of those names, which do you think ultimately makes the roster?
Mike Morris, Cam Young, Artie Burns, Kobe Bryant are the 4 names.
Daryl Taylor.
And Daryl Taylor. I think Taylor is the most likely of the 4, maybe just because he's the most physically talented. Like, he's maybe the guy that they really want to be good the most out of all those guys. But he's also a dude that like McDonald might just like hate, and like he's gone, and like he's only on a 1-year deal, and it's just like, get out. I don't know. That's the challenge. That's hard because those are all guys that like are like right on the edge of the cutoff.
Jeff?
I'm going to say Artie Burns does not make it. I think one of those rookies beats him out. I'm going to say Kobe Bryant does not make it. I think someone beats him out. I think he's going to be one of the last players on the roster if he does make it. And I'm going to say that Cam Young does not make it.
Okay. Who's going to be the Jake Bobo of this year? Who's going to be the name that maybe people are not saying right now, but they're going to be talking about a lot more after training camp? You want me to give you some options? Because if you're not super familiar with all the back end of the roster.
Yeah, probably.
All right. George Halani, running back. Ricky Person, running back. Derek Young, Laviska Shenault, D. Eskridge, Hayden Hatton, Jack Westover, Mike Jarrell, Satoa Lamea, Garrett Greenfield, the tackle, undrafted free agent tackle that had a lot of people after him. Matt Gotel, the big 340-pound defensive nose tackle. Easton Gibbs, Montana linebacker. Nelson Caesar, undrafted free agent, got a lot of guaranteed money. Jonathan Sutherland, safety, been around, been a little injured, but been around on the team. Any of those names jump out to you guys as guys that could kind of come out of quote nowhere to be big parts of the team?
Westover certainly fits the fan favorite profile, right? Like UW guy, pass catcher, like he can make like visible plays that everyone likes, and I think he's fairly athletic and everything. The one you didn't say that I think could be, and it's a little bit of a different deal because he's not super young, but Laviska Shenault could like just have the most ridiculous kick return touchdown that you've ever seen in the preseason and never do anything again. And we like fans won't stop talking about it until like week 12. So those would be my 2, I think. Shenault, I think, is definitely a guy that could just be like, or alternatively, have like 2 amazing preseason games and then like tweak a hammy, and every week we're like, oh, is it Laviska Shenault week? And then like he'll come back in week 12 and never do anything, and we'll be
What about you, Jeff?
I think that last scenario is incredibly plausible.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be a flashy position. I don't think like Matt Gotel is going to like be the fan favorite. So I'm going to say like Nelson Caesar.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just think he's a guy that might flash. Like, I don't know if we'll have the Nick Reed preseason. Like that was the most flash in the pan we've ever seen. But I think he's a guy that with the right opportunity, they gave him a lot of guaranteed money. I think he was a draftable player on a lot of draft boards. He was like a 6th-round guy. I think he's a guy that could be really interesting in the preseason. The other guy, I think Helani is a guy that fits a lot of the Seahawks kind of types they've had at running back, like the Chris Carsons and some of those kind of guy. And I think he's a guy that might get a lot of attention if it's like him and Kenny McIntosh at the end of those preseason games where they're barely playing starters anymore. I don't know how McDonald will handle it relative to where the league's gone. But again, it's a running back, but those are the kind of positions that I think fans tend to trick themselves in preseason games. So I'm going to go with the two of those guys.
There's one other. I don't know if he's the Jake Bobo. I mean, he's really just more the Drew Lock, but Sam Howell could be another guy that like.
Oh, that's a good call out.
That is a good call.
Because he's gonna be playing against backups too, man. He's gonna play awesome in the preseason. And like Gino will come out for like one series and like get sacked and everyone will hate him. And I
don't know if Gino's gonna play in the preseason.
Yeah, it might be PJ Walker.
Yeah.
You don't think he'll play at all in the preseason?
I don't know if he will. I mean, we'll see, but it's the way preseason is getting shrunk so much. They pretty much are just trying to get looks at all these back end of the roster. My guy, so I get a lot wrong. I got Bobo right last year. I got Helani as the guy. I think the guys that the people tend to fall in love with are either running back, receiver, or edge rushers. I got Levi Bell wrong. I mean, I was right that he was. I got after the first game, I was like, this guy's pretty good. I was wrong that they ended up doing anything with him. I'm sad. I would have loved to see Levi Bell with this group, but oh well. But yeah, I think Helani is gonna wait. I will switch it up. Is this a fair one to put in there? Kenny McIntosh?
I thought about him too, actually. Yeah,
I think it's fair.
Is that fair to put in there?
Yeah, because the nerds are going to be all over that too. Like,
yeah,
everyone will be united in cheering for him.
Yeah. All right, I'll go with Kenny McIntosh just to give a little bit of spice to it.
What's the white receiver's name? Hayden
Hatton?
So I have a follower. I think we all have a follower who was like a UDFA like expert, and he was like freaking out that the Seahawks pulled that guy. And he was telling me on DM that like this guy is like the dude of the UDFA class. So
he's from what I saw, he is an excellent high point catcher. Like he is a guy that can go up in like contested catch and make the big grab. Like he's what, with a 10th of the physical capabilities of DK Metcalf, he's making plays that you kind of think DK Metcalf would be making all the time, but doesn't. And so he does have some of that in him. I don't know. I mean, he could definitely flash during the preseason. I think that's not crazy at all. I don't think he's Jake Bobo though. Like, I don't think he's like Jake Bobo brought a lot to the table, and then he just had these physical limitations. But like as a receiver, he was a pretty complete package, like coming into the NFL. I don't think that's who Hayden Hatton is. I might be wrong though. We'll find out.
Is this the year we get the Bridge hype train back on the tracks?
I don't know if you saw, I did an interview with Jarek Reed, and he brought up D-Eskridge again, and
players hate to practice against that dude.
There's a lot of respect for him as a player in the front office, in the practice field. Would love for it to transition to actually being on the real field. That would be great. Okay, last question before we do Patreon questions, guys. Kind of the inverse of the question I asked of who who would you be worried if they ended up, starting and getting a role? What's a storyline that could plausibly happen that you think would mean a meaningful positive outcome? What would be the most positive outcome for a single player that you can imagine in training camp, where it's like, if this guy plays well enough to become a starter, that's a really, really good indicator for where things are going. And we'll, tease out the like, oh, he's starting because of an injury, like that. It literally like goes out and wins a role. What position, what player comes to mind for you? Nathan, you have something in mind?
It's kind of tough. JSN. If JSN comes out and like there's like talk about like, yeah, they're gonna play a lot of 11, but JSN's really got like JSN has beat out Tyler. They're gonna like, if there's any kind of like that kind of like subtext or vibe or whatever, I think that would be really huge, both just to alleviate a lot of the angst that we have after how JSN was used last year, and just showing like, where he's at and beating out Tyler and promoting him into something like that. But I don't actually know like what does that even look like. They're not going to come out and like, oh, JSN, he's the starter over Tyler. It doesn't really work like that. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know that anything like the other one. I mean, Abe Lucas, just
that's a great one.
Yeah.
I mean, if he comes and he plays a great, remember his rookie preseason where he was it was like pancake watch. It was like IHOP every freaking game. That'd be great. That'd be huge.
Yeah.
Jeff, I almost am certain what your answer is going to be, but I want to hear it anyway.
This is the first thing that came to mind. I wonder if you'll put this. Tyrese Knight.
Oh,
Tyrese Knight. I think
if Tyrese, buddy, I like it.
I think if Tyrese Knight is like the guy and Mike McDonald is this like linebacker guru, and we were just all completely wrong on this guy, and he's actually good, I think that can have a dramatic impact on the team. And I still think it'll end up being Baker, and Knight does seem like a project, but if he just hits the ground running and like these physical tools are actually ready to go, and he's not the project and he's not a disaster, I think that will have a dramatic impact on this team's potential. And obviously, I think so much of, I wonder what you thought I would have gone with, but to me, like, if he's good and we were all just completely wrong about him, I think that's going to be really exciting for what it looks like the obvious weakness of this roster.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I had Seahawk Nerd on the show this morning, Hot Blogger Mornings, and he dropped some knowledge that there was a study done, like a regression analysis on college football players, linebackers, and what was the biggest indicator of NFL success. And the highest correlated number was tackles. And Tyrese Knight was 4th last year in college football. He was 2nd in solo tackles. And so there's at least some indication that if you are good at tackling the opponents, that you might be good at linebacker in the NFL. So that's some fuel for your fire there, Jeff. I'm going to rattle off a bunch of names because I think almost any of these guys, if they beast mode in preseason to where it's not just a mirage, but they are legitimately a dude now, it would be huge for the Seahawks. The number one that comes to mind for me is Byron Murphy. Like, if this guy is half the player that I think we're hoping he is and starts to show that, that's a really, really big deal. I mean, it's a really big deal. I don't even need him to start, but if it's like nobody can block him, love it. I thought for sure you were going to say Christian Haynes, Jeff. That's been your go-to. Like, yeah. If he rises and he like is like undeniable as a starter, as a rookie in game 1, that's a really big deal. A lot of these names are around the offensive line. Charles Cross, since you mentioned Abraham Lucas, if Charles Cross is like, okay, no, this guy has taken a step he is not the same mediocre left tackle that he's been. He is like ready to ascend. That would be huge. I think JSN's a great one. Here's one that's like out of left field, and a guy that I'm not a big believer that this could happen, but it would be huge, is Derek Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If he all of a sudden is like, well, holy shit, like where are you going to get snaps for this guy? Because there's no way that you can just leave him as like the fourth string edge. Then all of a sudden edge becomes an interesting group, right? Nathan, you look like you were about to say something there.
Well, I was gonna say, and I think he could fit into the Patrick Queen role really well too. Both him and Knight. If either of those dude pop, like I'm probably higher on Hall than Knight, but like both of those guys have the skill set that if they like really like fit into that role, they could be a problem.
I think those are the most. I mean, I could keep naming guys. I'll end up naming the whole roster. The only other guy I would say is Reek Woolen.
That's who I was going to say. Actually.
That's a great answer.
What were you going to say? Go on, Nathan.
Well, and because I think like one, he was so good, especially as a rookie, playmaker, and like if he also it's just a spot on the roster that could use somebody that just real like if he comes in and just is awesome again or just very good again and he locks that spot down, the secondary feels so much better because right now it's a pretty big question mark. I mean, Trey Brown's not like a world beater by any means, but like if he's your third guy and you're kind of scheming around that, like you feel okay about it. But if you're having to like figure out stuff around Brown and around Woolen, that's rough. And then like if you take that from a question mark to like what we saw in flashes and like, well, I mean, his PFF grade was amazing for a man coverage. So like if they can really accentuate that and get a plus out of that spot, that's suddenly a big swing, I think, for the defense.
Yeah. I mean, Leslie Frazier's talked about him on the Move the Sticks podcast as the guy that they want to travel with the number ones on the other team and be their lockdown. I mean, I don't think he was ready for that last year, but he certainly has the talent for it. There's one other name that I want to give credit to Matthew Phillips in chat for bringing up that I think definitely belongs on this list that I've talked about this way, but left off is Mike Morris. I mean, that's a guy that did not play last year. I think is really got some upside. Is why like when Jeff and I were on day 3 draft watch party, you know, not this past draft, but the one before, I was like, yeah, Mike Morris, right? Like we were naming these guys. And if he ends up becoming like a very good defensive end, and now you've got him and Murphy as young, up and coming defensive linemen, that would certainly be a big deal for sure. So lots of names, lots of guys we're going to get excited about. I can't wait. By the time we do this show next week, I will have actually been at training camp with my eyes on some of these players, and we'll be able to talk about real. Well, as real as training camp ever can get. Nathan, can you do some Patreon questions for us? Would you mind pulling open Patreon questions for folks that have not signed up? Patreon.com/HawkBlogger gets you access to all the audio versions of Hawkblogger Mornings, emergency pods, draft, crazy shows that we do, all the stuff that's other than the Real Hawk Talk show. Everybody gets Real Hawk Talk. It also gets you access to the Slack channel where you get to talk with other Seahawks fans and you get to ask us questions every week. So Nathan, what do they have for us this week?
Okay. Trenches no matter what wants to know the Mike McDonald Ravens defensive roster counts deep dive was really interesting. What do you hope he does to maximize the Seahawks current defensive personnel? Brian, I'll send this one to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I did this I think yesterday. I think the question is asking like, what am I hoping that he'll keep in terms of different positions relative to maximize?
Yeah, because he also says, I'm hoping for more trenches.
Yeah, so that was the thing that really concerned me was seeing that there's a year that he kept 4 players at the defensive line. It was also really shocking to me that he kept 5 inside linebackers both years. I will be very disappointed if the Seahawks cut Mike Morris and Cam Young, but more Mike Morris, and keep Patrick O'Connell. Like, that will be hard for me. Like, I don't think that's the right trade-off. So I agree with him that that I would like to see at least 5 players on the defensive line to make me feel comfortable with the way that this roster's got its talent. I think the other one that's going to be really interesting is corner. He kept 6 1 year, 7 another year. If he keeps 6 this year, then either Artie Burns or one of the draft picks aren't going to be on there. If he keeps 7, then you're talking about potentially all 3 of those guys making the roster. And so that's another one that's flexed to be interesting. But to me, it really hinges on defensive line versus off-ball linebacker. I do not want to see 5 names, but maybe with the kickoff rules, maybe off-ball linebacker is a position just you need for special teams more. I don't know. We'll see.
When you say 4 defensive linemen, are you talking about 4 defensive tackles? Like, does Jadeveon Clowney count towards the 4 they kept last year?
Okay. He was an edge.
I see.
He's an outside linebacker.
So it would be, so let's just say Williams, Reed, Hankins, and then one of Young.
It would be, if it was 4, it would be Williams, Murphy, Reed, Reed, and Hankins.
Yeah.
And so that means at 4, you don't have room for Mike Morris. You don't have room for Cameron Young.
I mean, I guess he's too big, but I mean, you can kind of look at him sideways and think he's an edge, right?
Who, Mike Morris?
Yeah, at least kind of as a 3.
But then you're off on the numbers there. Are they going to keep Mike Morris at edge over Nwosu Mafe, Derek Hall, Draymond Jones, and Darrell Taylor? They kind of have their edges there. And Nelson Caesar is going to potentially be a guy that has a chance to press that group. He could push Darrell Taylor off the roster. $3 million you save if Darrell Taylor doesn't make the team.
What happened to Miles Adams? Where's Miles Adams these days?
He's on the list. I've got him. Like, I don't talk about him because I don't think he profiles as a Mike McDonald defensive lineman. He is light. He's 280. He is a pass rushing defensive tackle. He is an awful run defender. So as much as I like Miles Adams, but of course, this is coming from a guy that 3 months ago said Draymond Jones doesn't have a place on this team past this year. He's the guy they're probably most excited about playing at outside linebacker. So who knows?
Yeah, I think you're probably still right about the Draymond Jones things, but I guess we'll see how that all goes.
We'll see.
Okay, Nick S wants to know, due to the new special teams plays, has Jason Myers' value increased or decreased due to his Evan-esque stature? Evan is quite swole these days, is my understanding, so I don't know if that's fair to Evan. But yeah, Jeff, weigh in on whether Jason Myers and his baby face are a liability now on special teams.
Jason Myers is a huge liability. They can change the rules all they want. He's still going to be a massive liability who can only go 1 good year every 2. And no matter what, even if he's kicking well, I base kickers purely on vibes. I know how I feel when they're kicking. And I feel awful every time Myers is kicking. And even though he has a good year every other year, like Steven Hauschka, like he faded at the end. Like I just felt like belief whenever he went to kick. Totally vibes based. Blair Walsh had like the lowest kicking vibes I've ever seen. Janikowski was hilarious, so I just laughed every time I saw him. But
does Jason Myers pass your dumb face test?
Not really. No, he's right in the group.
He's right on the edge, isn't he?
Yeah, he's. That's why my belief is so low in him.
He and Daniel Jones kind of have a similar, I take him over Jones.
Jones had like the lowest score on the dumb face percentage.
Yeah.
Whoa, lower than Eli or Jay Cutler?
Active players.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eli's the lowest.
I I'm curious where you rank Philip Rivers in this too, but we don't need to get into all the weird faces. In
We
the
should
NFL
spend an
this week.
episode on that. Yeah.
Okay, Braxton, parenthetical, the Mariners make me sad.
To make us all sad.
Are they still winning the division?
Yeah, I think
Mariners are
winning
like 10 games.
is a kind of a kind word to put it.
Mariners are like 10 games over 500 or something, and Mariners fans are somehow mad about it. Like, y'all need to learn your place. But anyways, we're incredibly thin at off-ball linebacker, and it's already a possibility we start the season without either Baker or Dodson. Should we make a move at linebacker before the season, and who are some names to keep an eye on? Brian. I guess, Brian, who do you think we should make a move at linebacker?
Personally, I do. I know who John Radigan is. I have a pretty good idea who Patrick O'Connell is, and I would rather I'm even a little disappointed that they're both ahead of Drake Thomas. Not because I think Drake Thomas is any great shakes, but at least he's an unknown, and I'd take that right now. And so I think there's a few names I've floated out there. The ones that I'll just name two that I may be most interested in. Jamin Davis from the Commanders, former first-round pick. They signed Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, and it's pretty clear Jamin Davis is not in their future plans. He's in the last year of his deal. I think that and Adam Peters, John Schneider, they've already done a deal for Sam Howell. I think they just added Scott Fitterer to their front office, another connection with Schneider. So I wouldn't be shocked if that name is out there. Another name that I mentioned before, Otis Reese, is a linebacker for the Titans, and they added Kenneth Murray. They drafted Cedric Gray. They just signed this guy named Jamal Adams, who sometimes is thought to be a linebacker. So Otis Reese is this would be his second year. Again, was a UDFA last year, played really well at the end of last season. He's another name that might just be available because they might not have a spot for him, and he's got some athletic upside that's interesting. There's one other guy on the Jets that I like quite a bit, and I'm spacing on his name, but I feel like he is less likely because I think he's too good. He plays behind, CJ Mosley and my goodness, Quincy Williams. What is his name? Is it Sherwood? I don't know. Doesn't matter.
So if you pull up over the cap, the first unsigned free agent on the list for linebackers is Leighton Vander Esch, who I believe retired, correct?
Yes.
And do you know who number 2 on the list is?
For what?
Of just available linebackers. It's an old friend, Nick Bellore. Bring him home.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, maybe it's Jamie and Sherwood. That might have been the name of the guy. But anyway, I think the Jets have a little bit of a surplus back there. He might be an option. So there's a couple names.
Gotcha. That's it. We had a light day for Patreon questions.
Yeah, that was my issue. I forgot to put it into the Slack channel until late in the day, but I appreciate folks jumping in there and asking the questions as quickly as they did. Fellas, kept you over the hour. Appreciate you coming on. It's great to see you, Nathan. Great to get this trio back together. We're gonna get Evan back on here once he gets back from all his world travels. And what is your guess that he knows more? He knows any of the players that are new on this team other than Byron Murphy?
I'm not going to comment because one of the first things I did before I jumped on here was pulled up the Seahawks roster page just to make sure I remembered who all the players were.
Yeah,
I have faith in Evan. I'm sure he'll do great.
I hope so. I hope so, and I hope he doesn't do great because it's way more fun when he.
I was gonna say I'm going opposite. I think he's gonna just flush out everything. I think he'll remember Jason Myers. I think Evan's going to be off the loose this year. If McDonald's good, I think Evan's going to be a lunatic this year.
It's going to be so fun. I mean, that's part of what I'm looking forward to. If this goes the way I hope it does. Folks, if you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. It helps people find the show, helps grow the community. It's going to be such a fun season. The more people that are part of it, the better. All you got to do is click the like button. If you want, also join as a YouTube member, join as a Patreon member, patreon.com/hawkblogger. The links are in the description of the video. Please do it. Please join. Please be part of the fun. It's going to be a great ride. Until next time, thank you to Nathan Ernst at NathanE11, Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons, and I'm Brian Nemhauser at Hawk Blogger. This has been episode 323 of Real Hawk Talk. Take care, everybody.